All right, what's up, guys? How we doing? It's Chuck and Nick here to bring you an amazing 11 game slate after we had two short two gamers in a row. Nick, any early thoughts on today?
Yeah, I mean, we were joking around before we started. It's almost like playing a different sport. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
ownership's pretty flat today. You can take stands a lot easier, and if you miss out on one guy going off, you'll still probably be okay. But yeah, at the same time, I mean, there's a lot more decisions to make. So I don't know. I like these bigger slates more than the smaller slates. Obviously, there's a sweet spot in between, but yeah, I don't know what the NBA is doing. I do enjoy the in-season tournament, though. I will say that it's definitely been more enjoyable than I expected. But as far as DFS goes, it does make things difficult.
Yeah, so I think the tournament is great.
Mhm.
It's so funny with the Suns game last night. The stuff with the timeout and
Oh
they
my
really
god!
want the Lakers in the finals. They're going to name it the LeBron Cup after a year or two
Yeah,
anyway. So,
right. Hey, you're a
so
Lakers fan, though, right? So you're not bad about that.
Well, it's unfortunate because like every single Lakers game this year, I'm rooting for overtime, and so I actually wanted overtime, and like I still want the Lakers to win, but I want a few more minutes for my guys in my lineup.
I hear you.
Injury news today. I think the big one was Anthony Edwards. Right before the show started, we did get word that he's going to play today without a minutes restriction, which is great.
Mhm.
What else do we have today in terms of injury news?
Yeah, I mean, it's never fun going to the Blazers, but there's no eight in there, no Jeremy Grant either. So that front court's very, very thin. Sounds like they're getting Anthony Simons back. I don't know if that's official yet, but he went through shoot around, I believe, so he should be good to go. The one other piece I think that could change things as far as lineup construction is Mark Williams for the Hornets is still questionable. If he's out and Nick Richards starts, he'd become another value center. We have a few. We have Duop Reith in Portland. And then what's his name? Orlando Robinson if he starts again for Miami. So Richards would just kind of join that group as another value center to consider if Williams is out. But yeah, still no Levine for the Bulls. I think that matters a little bit. DeRozan looks really good tonight. Sounds like Dallas is healthy. But yeah, I think that's most of it, other than stuff that's kind of been the case for the past few slates. So nothing really new or breaking.
Yeah, we'll have to hear for word on Jordan Poole. He's a game time decision, and then Kelly Oubre is back after getting hit by a car. So I don't think it's going to change too much with the Sixers rotation. I think I just got a notification that DeAnthony Melton is he's sick, but he's playing today. So the main Philadelphia pieces, I mean, it's obviously Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. I don't really think that's going to affect them too much, especially in a matchup against Washington. Like Joel Embiid's always going to look great. I think last time he destroyed them in just three quarters, didn't even play the fourth. So maybe blowout's a concern, but he got there in three quarters last time anyway. And if they do blow out Washington, then
Yeah.
it's probably because Joel Embiid went off, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's tricky tonight. I think in terms of lineup construction, some of the best value is at center. On DK, it's easy. You could just play two. On FanDuel,
Mhm.
it's interesting though. Like, I'm not rushing to play Duop Reith and give up that opportunity cost. I do like Orlando Robinson if he starts, but I mean, Embiid is probably the best pay up on the board. So it is tricky. Like, you're choosing between the best pay up or the best value. So I don't know. I think I'm only playing a handful of lineups tonight. I'll probably work on both constructions. My first build, though, I will say had Orlando Robinson at center, which is not the best feeling in the world, but I do think there's plenty of upside there with Bam out of the lineup.
No, Orlando Robinson's been great. The problem is the Heat aren't willing to give him full minutes. They're still trying out Thomas Bryant a little bit, who has not been great.
Yeah.
But if Orlando Robinson is starting, I'm not sure if he started the last game, but he had an okay game, and it just hopefully he just plays well enough, or maybe Thomas Bryant gets into foul trouble, so Orlando Robinson can get all the run because he's going to be one of the best values. I don't think that our model is even really going to project the minutes correctly. It's kind of just guessing. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. He did start last game. He was still limited minutes, but got close to 30 fantasy points. So I do like him a lot here. They priced him up on DK. Duop Reith is near minimum price for Portland. So, like, even if that game blows out or gets out of hand at 3,200 on DK, he is really solid value. But yeah, I do prefer Orlando Robinson for just 500 more than Duop on FanDuel.
I like that call. And just looking at the top of the model, we'll get into the centers, after we do the guards and forwards. But Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic going to be near the top with Luka Doncic. We saw Luka, the Mavs went on a 30-0 run.
Yeah,
I
that
thought
was
my Luka
nice.
lineups were dead. but
Yeah, man.
it
That,
just completely went from like the bottom to I almost shipped a tournament on Saturday. Got very close,
that was fun.
but
Yeah.
let's
Now Luke has been awesome even with Kyrie in. Kyrie is back, which is notable, but I don't think either of those guys would be even hurt. It's like they just wanted to rest them. Um, but Dante Exum's back doesn't matter too much, but he is a piece of that rotation that we have to factor. So I don't know. Again, the luxury of these bigger slates is we don't have to talk about guys like Dante Exum. So yeah, he's back, but that shouldn't really affect anything there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to look at the other Dallas guards. Okay, so like Jaden Hardy and Seth Curry were super chalk, but they're not even on the radar today, especially with their increased price tag. So luckily, we don't have to do anything there.
Mm-hmm.
From the top of the model, do any of these other guards stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Maxi, for the same reasons we like Embiid, it's just a ridiculously good matchup. I'm not going to be surprised if he has a massive game here, even if Embiid does. Either way, you're getting him at pretty low ownership, a reasonable price. I'm a Nets fan, but I will say they have not been great against guards defensively. This is a good spot for Trae Young. Trae
Mhm.
Young, slow start to the season, has really been elevating his game lately. We're getting him at low ownership, so if I'm paying up at guard, I do like Trae. On FanDuel, I think there's a couple guys that are mispriced. I think the ownership's going to reflect that. Maybe not as much as it should, but Fred VanVleet, 7,700 feels too cheap for me, even against OKC. Dinwiddie, unplayable on DK at 7,900, but you get him shooting guard or point guard on FanDuel at 6,600. He's very appealing here. Then we have the whole Utah situation, I guess, is worth just bringing up. Colin Sexton probably coming off the bench. I think we're projecting him for 25-ish minutes. His price has come up a bit. I still think he's very appealing on FanDuel at 5,200. More of kind of like a large field play on DK at 58, but with no Clarkson there and no Laurie Markkinen, I do think he has a chance to maybe see a few extra minutes here. But
Yeah, I was going to be interested in Colin Sexton. I mean, it makes sense that he's so highly owned on FanDuel, but I mean, 30% on an 11 game slate for a guy who's probably not starting. I
yeah,
mean, it seems insane. Like, I'm still going to get to him, but I'm not excited about it. And then Keontae George, they definitely priced up on DraftKings. His price on FanDuel, I think, is still pretty reasonable, and that's reflected in the 24% ownership. But I like both of those spots for Utah. And it's like, Dallas isn't exactly a super tough matchup, right? And I mean, it's a high enough total, 233.5. We're not going to shy away from that game.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. But yeah, I mean, I guess the other spot, maybe Harden, who's sub 8K, he feels a little too cheap on both sides. Again, whenever we're dealing with these Clippers big three, it's like, which of these three is going to go off on a given night? But surprisingly, they've all been hitting value fairly consistently. We're not getting like massive ceiling games out of Kawhi, George, or Harden, but they're all kind of in that 45, 40 fantasy point range. So at 7,900, I don't mind that. And if you want a piece of that late game, I think it does make some sense. So I don't know. I don't mind getting to some Harden. He hasn't been shooting the ball as much, but he does everything else, which kind of boosts his floor a little bit. So even when his shot's not falling, we've seen him pushing value fairly consistently. Not the best matchup with Denver, but should be a competitive game with the Clippers playing at home.
Yeah, I mean, the Clippers were awful when Harden got here. They've picked it up a little bit, and they're only 1.5 point dogs to Denver, and it's one of the lower totals on the slate, but I still like that spot. Paul George, Kawhi, like I think just mixing these guys up is pretty good.
Yeah.
Another one of the most interesting games I think to me is Memphis and Detroit, and we have Desmond Bain, we have Cade Cunningham, and Cade
Mhm.
Cunningham, his true shooting percentage is like one of the worst in the league for guys taking that many shots, but he's still putting up the fantasy scores. Like he went off last game when no one played him. He's not pulling any ownership today. I think his price is still pretty reasonable on both sides, and then it does look like Desmond Bain is pulling 31% ownership on FanDuel at this 8,200 price. I don't mind getting there as much. I do prefer to kind of mix it up with other guys in a similar price range when guys are pulling 30% ownership on an 11 game slate.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's a bad spot, though.
Yeah, no, I agree on both. And I will say this on Cade, though. It sounds like Boyan's back or Boyan is back. So I don't know if Boyan's going to come off the bench or start, but he's one player I do expect to kind of cut into that usage rate for Cade at least a little bit. Honestly, it should help Cade just creating more open looks and boosting his assist percentage. Like he's passing to guys that can't make shots right now. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe Boyan on the floor actually opens things up for him. So it's kind of a neutral development that Boyan's back. But I do think it's notable though. And then while we're on this game, I mean, I will bring up Derrick Rose. Tough to trust now that he's over 5K, but he should get the start here in a competitive game. I mean, they're not rushing to get him to 30 minutes, but I think we could see maybe 25 to 28 here out of him, which at that price would be enough. Don't feel great about it, but he's been pretty pretty chalky, and I'm hoping his ownership comes down tonight. I can see maybe mixing him in a little bit on FanDuel, where you do get extra points for steals. Yeah, 12% on DK, 6% on FanDuel is what I'm looking at. And I mean, most of these Memphis games have been blowouts, so whenever you get them in a competitive spot, I do think there's a little bit more upside for someone like Rose. And I'm honestly biased. I'm a sucker for Derrick Rose, big fan of him. At this age, probably not the best play, but I mean, we're kind of lacking value at guard tonight, so I don't hate it. But I do agree that is an interesting game. Some high upside plays, not a lot of great defense there.
And I like what you said about, if Derrick Rose gets more than the 22 minutes we haven't projected for, which he easily could, the model doesn't love him as it is, but if you give him 26, 27 minutes, then he's going to jump up a bit in value on both sites. And I just want to mention Jalen Knoll. Guy was super chalk. He actually played over 30 minutes, and I think he shot like 1 for 9 at some point in the fourth
He was
quarter.
in a lot of my lineups that game. Yeah. I mean, he was on the floor. He just couldn't hit a basket and turning the ball over constantly too. But yeah, he is sharing those point guard minutes with Rose. It sounds like the Gilliard project is a failed one, and we're not going to see much of Jacob Gilliard moving forward.
It's unfortunate because that first Jacob Gilliard game, I was all over him. He helped me, finish near the top, and then never did anything again. The rest of the time is in the NBA. But Jalen Knoll, I would be interested in if he was cheaper, but at this price, and even at 2% ownership, I just don't even think he's a guy that we have to consider with Derrick Rose back.
Yeah, and maybe it's because I'm in the mode of playing these 2-game slates, but Vince Williams, another guard for them coming off the bench, I think he's forward only on DK, but he is shooting guard eligible on FanDuel. He is a shooting guard. But yeah, he's been awesome. I mean, and he's also pulling down rebounds, which is surprising. Coming off 5 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 8 rebounds in his last 3 games, consistently hitting shots as well. So very sneaky, low-owned, boomer bust, high-risk type play. But if we're talking about Memphis, I mean, Vince Williams is definitely a player just to at least keep an eye on, if nothing else.
I don't hate it. And just before we move on to the value, I just want to point out how many guys are coming in for sub 5% ownership near the top of the model. I mean, Trae Young, 5%, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 3% on both sites, and Steph Curry at 9,900 on DraftKings. I'm probably not going to get there over there, but on FanDuel at 9K at 4%, I'm always going to take shots on Steph, especially in a cake matchup against Portland. I mean, Golden State, they're 13-point favorites, but they haven't been great. And like this is almost blowout territory. So maybe that has something to do with his low ownership. But like if Golden State blows out Portland, I'd like to think Steph Curry has a lot to do with it. And at 9K on FanDuel, I'm going to take some shots on him. And then Anthony Edwards, no minutes restriction. His ownership is there, but I don't mind that spot either. The Kyrie Irving at 32%, even though he's 8,100 on FanDuel, it's definitely a misprice.
Yeah.
32% is kind of high.
Yeah, 11K. I did just think of one more in the mid-range. Not the most exciting play. Kind of feels like I'm talking about Derrick Rose again, but we have Kyle Lowry here for the Heat. Still sub 6K on both sides. Played terrible his last game out, but still no hero, still no Bam. And we've seen some big ceiling games out of him. So where he's sub 6K, not the best matchup with Toronto, but I'm a little bit surprised he's not drawing at least a little bit more ownership. I think people are really looking at that last game, maybe putting a bit too much weight into it because we've seen some big games out of Lowry with Bam and Hero out. So I don't mind him as a mid-range play if you're not comfortable with Rose. Again, similar, like could see a low floor, but I do think he's maybe a little bit under-owned for what he's capable of.
And especially like looking at the FanDuel price compared to Colin Sexton and the ownership, like this is a really good pivot. I think if you're trying to get away from Sexton at a guy to a similar price, or even playing them both together.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree.
Let's see. Other guys top of the model value. Brandon Miller stands alone at the top. 10% and 7% ownership. Like it's been a little bit hard for me to want to get to Brandon Miller. But with LaMelo still out, I mean, he stepped up a little bit. He looks better than he did the first couple of weeks, and so I don't mind it at this low ownership. I mean, top of value for single-digit ownership is always something that we want to pay attention to.
Yep.
And then right under him, Anthony Simons projected for 38% on DraftKings. Like the 5,500 price is for sure incorrect, despite him coming off the injury. I mean, if he plays the 29 minutes we haven't projected for, he should be a pretty good play at 5,500 over on DraftKings, and even the 6,300 on FanDuel at 7%. I guess I wouldn't mind taking some shots over there too, especially what I said about Steph. If Portland manages to keep the game a little bit closer, Anthony Simons shouldn't lose any of his fourth quarter run.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on Simons. It'll be interesting to see if we get any word on minutes or anything like that. I really haven't been following his recovery process that closely. Just not paying a ton of attention to the Blazers this season. But I mean, he is the guy who's going to lead the usage on that team when he is healthy, even over a Brogdon. And still no Jeremy Grant as well should boost his usage. So there's plenty of reasons to like Simons. The price being probably the number one.
And a couple interesting things when sorting by value on DraftKings specifically, there's not a single guard listed for under 5K without scrolling down. And even
Ooh.
scrolling down a little bit, there's still like Bilal Coulibaly is the first one that shows up pretty far down the value list. And so I don't think we want to necessarily just go value at guard. Hopefully, we'll find some value at the forward positions.
Mhm.
But I always talk about this. Like Trey Young is near the top of the OF index, and he's near the top of value for his price, coming in at 4%. Like these guys, they're not going to hit every night, but a lot of the times that we've pointed these guys out on the show, they've had pretty good games. And even though it's an 11 game slate and he's very expensive, and we're probably not going to have great value, like Trey Young, Tyrese Maxey, Luka Doncic is one of the top three. I don't know if he's more expensive. I guess Jokic is probably more expensive than him today, but like
Yeah.
him showing up this close to the top of value, like that's something we have to pay attention to.
No, I totally agree. I mean, the upside's tremendous for all these guys, but you mentioned Trey. Like, that's what I'm planning on getting a lot of. Again, good matchup here against the Nets. I think this game is the highest total on the board. And he really has turned a corner over the past few weeks, taking more shots, making more shots. So, yeah, Trey Young, maybe my favorite guard play, like in general, especially at that ownership. Seems way, way, way too low.
I might be with you on there at like just like overall, not even considering price, just Trey Young. I'd say we probably want to try to get him in our lineups. And then a couple of other mid range guys, Max Struess showing up near the top of value. Always love to see that 6,300, 6,100 for sub 5% ownership. Is Orlando a tough matchup? They are like number one or two in the East right now.
Yeah. I mean, things have definitely changed there. They are a tougher matchup than I think people are maybe giving them credit for. And the thing about Cleveland and Orlando is they both play kind of slow.
Mhm,
But the thing about Struess is there's still no Karis LeVert for Cleveland. And I guess we
mhm.
missed that as a piece of injury news because it's been known. I did see someone comment that Dean Wade is in. That shouldn't really matter too much here for Struess. Struess is a guy who relies on scoring, so his shot's going to have to fall. But if this Magic defense keys in on the backcourt there, maybe he gets some open looks on the wing. So yeah, I'm fine with Struess. I think he's properly priced though, not like rushing to play him. But there's not a ton I like from that first game, but I do think he's one piece. I'd definitely consider.
And then just a couple other guys I want to mention. I guess one, Kobe White. He has been so fantastic when someone is missing, and
Yeah.
even with just Zach LaVine missing the game today. I mean, Kobe White is taking shots. He's getting assists. Like this dude is getting all the playing time. It's a really good matchup against Charlotte. 6,900 on DraftKings. This might be a little bit of a sticker shock on the
Yep.
price, right? We've never seen. This is probably the most expensive Kobe White's ever been, especially on FanDuel.
Mhm.
Not sure I'm going to get there even at the 1% at 7,400, but I mean, 6,900, he's still pulling 10% ownership. I don't think it's a terrible spot, especially the model is saying for his price, he's one of the better point per dollar plays at the guard spot.
Yep, yep. And the big thing with him too, not only is he seeing more usage with Levine out, he's also closing. And Kobe White's not a guy who's usually in the closing lineup for the Bulls, so seeing a lot of extra runs. So yeah, I'm with the field and like the sticker shock. Like I don't want to click over 7K for Kobe White, but in the matchup
Yeah.
with Charlotte, definitely a favorable spot. You're getting the extra usage with no Levine. You're getting extra minutes with no Levine. So I mean, he does check a lot of boxes. So I don't think it's crazy. He's been awesome. Like looking at the game logs, it's like wow. Probably
Yeah,
two of the best games of his career back to back. So if you want to ride that momentum, I don't think it's crazy.
I like it. Is there any other value guards we want to talk about before we move on to forwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably it. Just looking around, I think Jamal Murray is still listed as questionable. If he's out, Jackson's priced up, so I don't know that we can even get there.
Mhm.
I guess So Chan is maybe a little bit interesting. Mike Conley in that same game seems to score 30 fantasy points every night, regardless of where he's priced. So I think they're okay. But again, a game with a wide spread, we have 11 to choose from. They're not really jumping off the page at me. But I do think we kind of want to either pay up or live in the mid range at guard. Like there's no great punts tonight at the position. So yeah, we talked about a lot of them. I think we nailed most of them though.
Uh, I will mention Tyus Jones. If Jordan Poole is ruled out late,
That would be big.
then
Yeah.
Yeah, people just aren't going to get there as much as he deserves. I mean, he's already showing up near the top of value at 2 and 3% ownership at probably a little bit too cheap. Definitely too cheap if Jordan Poole's out. So if
Oh
Poole
yeah,
is out, I imagine Tyus Jones will be among my highest exposed players today.
I'm with it. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then let's take a look at forwards today. So, yeah, Brandon Miller is still forward eligible, showing up top of value. Derek Jones Jr., even with Kyrie, like this, Kyrie back shouldn't be affecting Derek Jones Jr. Maybe a little bit of usage, but him showing up near the top of value, something to pay attention to at under 10% ownership on a day when we really don't have good punts, like Nick mentioned. I mean, Tumani Kamara is the fourth best forward value, first guy we're seeing under 4,500. It just feels kind of gross.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the Portland, I guess, forwards are really interesting. Like Kamara not drawing a ton of ownership compared to Jabari Walker, who I think will come off the bench. I mean, Walker's been the better fantasy producer of the two, at least in terms of consistency. No Jeremy Grant. I think there's enough for both of them to go around, and I think in a blowout they should both get run regardless. So there is a floor there, even if the Warriors are dominating. But man, it doesn't feel good to click either of them, honestly.
No, and I like what you said. Like, so I personally prefer Jabari Walker as well, but at a 36-1 ownership difference, and the model is telling us that Kamara is the better value play.
Yeah.
I'm still going to have more Jabari Walker in my exposures tonight. I'm pretty sure, but I think we want to mix in Tumani Kamara just a little bit more than the field is.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Jabari Walker does feel like one of those necessary evil type plays. Like, there's not a lot of clear value on this slate that we can feel great about. So if you're just sticking with the field on a few pieces of chalk, make it the value. And tonight, that is Jabari Walker. So I'm comfortable kind of just taking him, sticking with the field, getting different elsewhere, like paying up for Trae Young, etc., and getting different that way. And just hoping Jabari does enough to kind of, I don't know, not break the slate, but not destroy it either.
And with who's available for Portland tonight, and considering the matchup with Golden State, like I'm pretty sure that they're going to share the court for a few minutes. So I really don't
Oh, yeah.
mind having them in the same lineup. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I'm not going to do it a ton, but I imagine I will have some lineups that have both of them. I think that's fine.
Yeah, totally.
He's a little cheaper than Trae Young, but Kawhi Leonard also showing up near the top of DraftKings value for forwards. DeMar DeRozan's up here. I mean, we got Paul George at 8,600, and so we really don't have good value. I mean, Nick Batum he's only 2% owned, and he got hurt the last time he was chalk, so maybe people don't want to play him. But like,
Ubre's back too. That should hurt Batum,
Mhm.
right?
Good point. Yeah, that's good. Maybe the mod. So Batum, I don't think has played a minute with Oubre yet. I'm pretty sure he got to the Sixers after Oubre went out. Might be mistaken. Maybe it's a couple games, but the sample size is so small that it's possible the model just isn't accounting for his usage being affected by Kelly Oubre. We have Batum for 24 minutes. If he actually gets 24 minutes, I think the 4,100 price is fine. I'm not sure if he will. Maybe if he's playing well, but especially with blowout potential in Washington, even at this low ownership, it's not really a spot that uh, I'm not going to try to get there, I guess.
No, I'm with you.
Some guys in the mid range, so I don't mind Patrick Williams and I don't mind DeAndre Hunter. I've been DeAndre Hunter all season. When he's good, I see 1% next to DeAndre Hunter's name. As long as he stays in the mid 5K range, like I'm gonna be well over the field on there. Are you gonna get to these two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I like Hunter. I also like Sadiq Bey. I think they're almost the same player at times when they're the same ownership. Like, again, we like this Atlanta spot. I mean, all the Brooklyn guys are kind of priced where they should be. So I'm getting to a lot of Hawks here. Again, the game with the highest total. Um, I don't know. Still no Jalen Johnson, so they're going to continue to see increased usage. So I'm with you on Hunter, and I also will add Bay to that conversation. Who was the guy you said first before?
Uh, Patrick Williams.
Oh yeah, I'm not crazy about Williams. I mean, again, no Levine. There should be a little bit extra for him to go around. It is a good matchup. I think at the price, he's fine. It's just not a guy I'm ever rushing to. But he does have that upside. I mean, at his price, I do think he makes some sense. So I wouldn't talk anyone off playing him.
Yeah, I mean, if Patrick Williams was a few hundred cheaper, I imagine he'd be closer to chalk. So
Yeah.
it's probably an appropriate price for him to keep his ownership in check. And Sadiq Bey, like this guy's third in the model in value, and I just skipped over him. I think I've had blinders on for him, but it's a lot
Yeah.
different when he's in the starting lineup instead of Jalen Johnson.
Mhm.
And so I like getting to him and DeAndre Hunter. I definitely think we want pieces from this game for sure. And
Yeah.
we'll see if we can find a couple Brooklyn guys to mix in there too. I mean, Mikal Bridges, This dude put up, what, 30 in the first quarter and then
He
had like
was
7 points
hot.
after that?
Yeah, man, he was on fire. It was fun to watch. He's priced up a little bit. I don't mind him as a forward play tonight. I think Cam Johnson looks fine on both sites. Again, pretty scoring dependent, but you're getting him at 6K on FanDuel, which feels too cheap to me. 65 over on DK. I think in terms of point per dollar, he's one of the more appealing options. We talked about guards already. I think Dinwiddie is probably the best play for Brooklyn on the Nets on FanDuel, but on DK, I mean, they're all kind of priced where they should be. It's tough. So I think Cam Johnson probably want to get to pretty, I don't want to say aggressively, but if I am taking a piece of Brooklyn. But yeah, I mean, it's tough tonight because there's a lot of good forwards in the upper range. You brought up DeRozan. I think he should be even higher owned than he is on DK at AK flat with no Levine. I mean, there are matchups we've seen with Levine out where he doesn't do well, but against Charlotte, like I have trouble seeing him not really go off here. I mean, I guess Kobe White's been eating up some of that usage, but on paper, he's one of my favorite plays. And then Jimmy Butler. The price is up, but if you want to pay up to be contrarian tonight at forward, I think 2% on Jimmy Butler with no Bam or Hero certainly screams that to me. So I love him on FanDuel where he's chalk, but on DK even, you're kind of paying a premium and we are lacking value. But to get him sub 5%, even in a tough matchup with no Hero or Bam, that just seems wrong to me. So I don't mind getting to some Jimmy. Obviously not going to work out every time, but if this is a competitive game, it's going to be because of Jimmy Butler. I don't mind paying a premium to get different.
No, and I like that. And Jimmy was super chalk, I believe, the last time the Heat played, and he was on pace to just failing everybody. But then he took over in the third quarter. He got the
Yeah,
value.
he always
Um,
does that. Yeah, he sucks the first half almost every game. DeRozan too. They're so similar. Like I don't know. I feel like every slate I'm tilting their first stint, they do nothing, then they come back in, and then they start to ramp it up. But yeah, I feel the same about both of them tonight. I like them a lot. But again, both lower owned, I believe, on DK because of the prices.
I'm pretty interested in basically every forward here who has a 10 or higher OF index, actually. We mentioned Jimmy, we mentioned Paul George and Kawhi already, DeMar DeRozan, Mikal Bridges, but looking at like Victor Wembanyama's coming in at 1 and 3%. And this is a guy that I was not in on to start the season, but I love him now, especially if he's going to come in this low owned. The 9K price, it's honestly probably a little bit too cheap considering the ceiling that he's shown, especially over on FanDuel.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was going to say it is one of the tougher matchups he's seen in a few games, but the ceiling has been tremendous out of him. And I mean, on FanDuel, you get the extra points for blocks and steals. This is a guy who's combined for 10 blocks, steals in a couple games this season. We've seen him with 8 blocks in a single game. It's just ridiculous. Like you're not getting that out of anybody, even the better centers in the league. So I like Wemby here. I will say it's not a great matchup, but at the same time, I mean that's why he's low owned. So I like him a lot as a tournament play, definitely.
Yeah, and if they keep like it's a 12-point spread, but if the Spurs keep the game close with the Timberwolves, I have to imagine Victor Wembanyama has a lot to do with it. And how
Oh
many times has this guy come out of the first quarter with 30 fantasy points on FanDuel because he has like 4 blocks and hit
yeah.
2 threes already? Like it's kind of insane.
Yeah, and he's getting there without playing extended minutes. Like he's capable. Like we've seen him get up to 35 minutes in a couple spots, but Pop is hesitant to give him really full run. So I mean, if there are games that are competitive and they're close, which is what you're going to need for him to hit value anyway, and he's going to get a few extra minutes, he could really, really help you climb a leaderboard late.
And on the other side of that game, I was going to be very interested in Karl Anthony Towns. I still think this was a good price for him with Anthony Edwards out.
Yeah.
I think I'm still going to take some shots on him at the 2% ownership, but it's not as appealing since we know Anthony Edwards is in without a minutes restriction. But it's not like a terrible matchup. I mean, yeah, he has to see Victor in the post, but Karl Anthony Towns is really good at basketball. So I'm still going to get, I mean, I don't know, maybe 5% in my exposure. It's not going crazy or anything.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And then both of the Toronto guys, Scotty Barnes and Pascal, both coming in for low ownership. Their prices seem appropriate. I think they're great. Paolo Banchero, probably a tough matchup against Cleveland, but coming in at, again, super low ownership. Like, he's been fantastic. I really don't mind getting to him. Same with Kuzma in this tough matchup against Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, if Washington's going to keep that game close, it's going to be Kuzma, especially if Pool's out. Like, if Pool's out, Kuzma's usage should go through the roof here. I'm with you on the Toronto guys. On paper, no one wants to play people against Miami, but with Bam out of the lineup, that is not the same defense at all. So this is actually a good matchup for the front court here for Barnes and Siakam. I like them a lot. Just scrolling through, we already talked about the guys for Atlanta. Brandon Miller's small forward on DK. I'm going to be pretty heavy on him. But if no one's going to go to Gordon Hayward, Hayward has kind of been deferring to Rozier and Miller in some of these games. But if he does get hot, he has upside. And 5% for him with LaMelo out does feel a little bit low, kind of price where he should be. So I'm fine to get to some Hayward as well.
I like that call on Hayward. And then, because it seems like Brandon Miller's actually probably going to, I would expect him to come in a little bit higher owned than this. But seeing Hayward and Miles Bridges at a lower ownership, especially Miles Bridges is back below 8K, and maybe he's better with LaMelo. I think there probably is a pretty strong correlation there. But under 8K, I'm still going to take shots on Miles Bridges at this price.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all.
Let's see if there's anyone on FanDuel standing out as value. Same guys: Brandon Miller, Derek Jones, Kamara, Strus, Andrew Wiggins, 5,300 over on FanDuel is coming in at 2% owned. Now his minutes have been up and down, but if, I play Andrew Wiggins in a few lineups and he kills them, don't really care. I have a bunch of other lineups, but if he ends up getting 29, 30 plus minutes, then 5,300, you're going to be pretty happy you have a few shares of Andrew Wiggins. So I don't mind that.
Yeah. I think Wiggins, I do want to say, I think he's coming back from an injury, right? He missed a couple of games. I don't know if there's any sort of limit on him or if that was like a personal reason or what. But I do know he missed a few. So
okay,
he'd be fine. Like I'm just bringing it up because I'm thinking out loud. But yeah, that is a situation that's fluid. We already talked about Bay, Hunter, Bogdanovich, kind of more of a shooting guard, but he is small forward eligible on both sites, drawing more ownership than the others. But again, this is a great matchup against Brooklyn. This game should be really pacey. We're going to see some ceiling games out of some of these guys here. And yeah, I think this is a good spot for Bogdan as well. And I don't love the ownership, though. I will say that.
I agree. Yeah, I'll get to Bogdan a little bit, but my default thinking is just I'd rather get to a little more Bay and DeAndre Hunter at lower ownership. At least we know they're in the starting lineup, even though Bogdan probably has a little bit more usage off the bench with one of Trey or DeJounte off the court. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple questions in chat. There was one I saw, thoughts on Podziemski from the Warriors. So this guy played 30 minutes in the last game, and he's had 2 good games in a row where he's been in the rotation. I was Chris Paul out though the last couple.
Paul was out and Wiggins was out.
Okay,
but on the other end of that, if this game were to blow out, he'd probably be the guy you get a ceiling game out of. So, I don't like him here because I don't project blowouts. But if you want to kind of play that narrative, then I guess he makes some sense. But he's way down my list tonight as far as plays I'm playing.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the slates, but he could be a night slate play, or maybe if you're playing a showdown, then that could be a showdown play as well. But on the main slate, it's just if he was $1,000 cheaper, then we'd be all over him. But he's a little bit too expensive, I think, to play on the main slate. Hence the 0% ownership. Yeah. And rather get to Trey or Luka on DK. So my personal feel like Luka's Luka, but Trey Young is showing up very close to Luka's OF index score. He's 1,400 cheaper on DraftKings at 1/3 the ownership. Trey Young, he's just been a different player than he was the first few weeks. He finally, got into the groove of the season and he looks great. Not that we don't like Luka, but we're star for value today. So it's really hard to get to Luka without having our lineups be very uncomfortable. Like we always want to be a little uncomfortable, but it's a little bit too tough today, I think.
Yeah. Unless you're eating a lot of that ugly value, then it's going to be tough to get to Luka. And that 1,400 difference in price, I think, matters a lot. So if salary doesn't matter for you, yeah, sure, Luka. But I think it does on a slate like this.
And on days like this, especially, like I don't know that we're expecting any late news, but it seems like we always get it anyway. And any type of value that opens up after lock is going to come in underowned. And I think we want to get there. And we just got news that Mark Williams is ruled out. So we'll see in a few minutes, I guess, how the model reflects that.
Yeah, just to touch on this quickly, we've seen this situation this year where Williams was out and then they went with JT Thor, which would suck here. But I don't think that's going to happen because they're playing the Bulls. Vooch is a big center. They're going to need Richards. So I think Richards gets a start. And honestly, I think if we're comparing him to Duwop Preeth and Orlando Robinson, I think point per dollar is probably my favorite of the 3, which might be an aggressive take, but we'll see what the model says.
Oh, I fully agree with you. I don't think it's close. Nick Richards immediately stands out as already the best value on the slate. 3,700 on DraftKings, even the 4,400 on FanDuel. FanDuel it's tougher because we can only play one center, but on DraftKings, where we are definitely starved for value, I imagine now he could be one of my most exposed players, and I'm assuming the lineups I built before the show. I was assuming Jordan Poole's out, and so I imagine Nick Richards and Tyus Jones are probably going to be two of my highest exposed players, assuming Poole is out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's right on the button. And yeah, I was hoping maybe Richards would have power forward eligibility, but no, he's center only on both sides. But again, I think I trust him more than I do these other centers, and this should be a competitive game against the Bulls, who really haven't been anything to write home about this season.
Yeah, the Bulls have been awful, and they've been a team I haven't loved targeting players against because their pace isn't great. I mean, the 221 total is pretty low,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still some spots we can take advantage of. And I just want to mention PJ Washington at 5,400 on
Mm-hmm.
DraftKings, especially with the power forward eligibility. I don't think they're going to want to play JT Thor and Nick Richards 48 minutes between them. So I'm pretty sure PJ Washington is likely in line to see some minutes at the center position today. It's just a question of because Chicago typically always has Vooch or Drummond on the court. So it's just a question if they want to match up PJ Washington with Drummond.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think they could maybe get away with it because I'm looking at the roster here. They don't have any other centers at all. So
Mhm.
yeah, like Leaky Black is a power forward, right? I don't know. He's going to be involved. And Richard or Washington, excuse me. I mean, we were struggling to get to him earlier in the season. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Trae Young, but he's kind of on a similar trajectory. Like since LaMelo's went down, it took a couple games, but we've seen ceiling games out of him. So at 5,400 on DK, that's way too cheap, in my opinion. I really, really do like Washington, even if he's coming off the bench. I think he's fine. And coming off the bench, that should keep his ownership down as well. So lots of reasons to like PJ here.
And just since we're on Charlotte, we didn't really mention Terry Rozier, but even at the 8,100, 8,400 prices, sub 5% ownership, I think he's a good GPP play.
Totally agree. I mean, very high ceiling, disappears sometimes, but who doesn't? So he had lots of reasons to like Terry, as long as Lamelo is going to be out, which should be for the foreseeable future.
And then we had a question in chat, any Simone Fontecchio. So he actually hasn't been terrible.
Yeah.
His Vegas PRA line today is 19.5, which is actually not bad, but 5,700 on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. I mean, I think we do have some better value than this. I don't think I'm necessarily really going to get there. Are you?
I mean, 5K on FanDuel is tempting in a thin small forward position. I will say that. I like the over on that 19.5 more than I like him as a DFS play. I think
Mhm,
he's gone over that every game with Laurie out. So
mhm.
maybe bet that. But yeah, I mean, at 5,700 on DK, I don't think it's necessary. More of a FanDuel play where you're getting him a little bit cheaper. So I don't hate it. But again, I mean, not the most exciting play, but he's definitely been a player I was low on, even given the extra opportunity that's proven me wrong. And you got to have a short memory in NBA DFS, so I'm
Mhm.
fine getting there a little bit.
And let's get into centers. We're probably going to get out of here in about 5 minutes. I don't think we're going to have the opportunity to build a dummy build, but we'll go through and just talk about some of our core plays before we get out of here. So Joel Embiid stands alone at the top. It's always interesting when he's showing up with a much higher OF index than Nikola Jokic, and I think that's something to pay attention to. I mean, Jokic is coming in for very low ownership, but as we've mentioned, we just don't have the value, and the model kind of agrees that Joel Embiid is the better play at the lower price.
Mhm.
And then other top centers, who are you most interested in?
I mean, tonight it's interesting. I think you pay all the way up or you pay all the way down.
Mhm.
Embiid looks great. Joker looks fine. I don't mind Sengun. His price continues to climb though. But then yeah, it's going to be the value guys otherwise. And now we're going to get to a ton of Richards as long as he's starting. We already talked about Orlando Robinson. Keep an eye on that Miami lineup. If he's starting, he's very much in play. And then Duop Wraith, I think even if this game blows out, he should get all the run at center he can handle, which may not be more than like 20 minutes. But at 3,200 on DK, I do think he makes sense as value. But yeah, I mean, it's just tricky. Like there are good center plays in every price range tonight, but on a slate lacking value at guard, there's a few wings we like at forwards for value, but not really that much. Like all the good values at center, so I think you kind of have to pay down as much as I want to try to get to Embiid. It's tough. Just because, again, no great value at any other position. We have three guys that are definitely viable at center.
Just real quick, we did just get a notification that Jordan Poole is playing today, and so Tyus Jones at 5,600. he's a deep GPP play. He's not going to be one of my most exposed players anymore. Just to be clear on that. But I completely agree with you, Nick. We want to pay up or we want to pay down. I will say the one mid-range center I'm interested in, and I was already interested in him before, but going against Nick Richards now, Vucevic at 8,400 and 8K, pulling
Mm.
basically no ownership. I'm going to take some shots there. We've centers against Charlotte, whatever, but now it's not even Mark Williams starting, and so it's Nick Richards. He should be able to have his way. But other than that, yeah, I'm either paying up or I'm going full value with Nick Richards, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think the Vooch plays sneaky. I mean, he's been pretty inconsistent, but whenever he has a size advantage or he's playing the Bucks, he does really well. So I like Vooch here. Again, no Levine should boost his usage. Yeah, that's a good mid-range play for sure.
And yeah, just none of these other guys are really interesting. Like Sengun's been fantastic. He's going up against Chet. Chet has been top 10 in almost every defensive metric that matters this season.
Mhm.
And so it's not necessarily wanting me to push away from Sengun, but just that combined with us just not really having
Yeah,
good
the
value on
price.
this slate. Like I'd rather just pay the extra to get to Embiid or go all the way down. So yeah, gotta
Right.
love Duhop Reith's DK value, man.
Oh God, I know, right? I got one more. Claxton's price on DK still seems wrong to me. FanDuel 7,800, a little bit too pricey, especially on this slate. But 6,800, where you could play two centers, maybe play Richards with the Claxton. I mean, plenty of upside for him here in a matchup against Atlanta, who hasn't been great in the front court in terms of defense this season. So yeah, fine getting to some Claxton at that price until it climbs up over 7K, which is where it probably should be.
That's actually a really good call. I missed that one. 6,800 on DraftKings, 3%. I mean, against Atlanta, this is the game we want to target, and we're getting a really good price on a center capable of putting up pretty good fantasy score. So I like that call too.
Yeah, his best game of the year actually came against Atlanta. I think he had 22 points, 11 boards, something like that. Not the game log watch or anything, but he's shown that he could do well here, and he's cheaper than he was, I think, last time around.
Nice. I'm gonna have to bump him up. I think I missed him because I wasn't getting him in any of my runs, but I'm definitely gonna put in a min exposure or something to get a few shares there. And we got the Pistons starting lineup, and it doesn't matter too much, but Bogdanovich is starting.
Mm.
Cunningham, Hayes, Stewart, Dern, Bogdanovich. So I think we already saw Sar Thompson get benched, and I just don't understand why. I mean, the Pistons are gonna set the record for most losses in NBA history, but develop like your rookie, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't agree with what they're doing, but I do think now that Bojan is 5,100 starting on DK, he's one of the better forward plays on DraftKings, certainly. And I don't mind him on FanDuel either. Again, this is a guy who's going to demand a lot of usage here. He's one of the only guys who can score consistently on this team because they haven't developed a lot of these players. So I do like Bojan. He's been, I mean, the first game we saw him back coming off the bench, 27 minutes, hit 30 fantasy points. And this should be a pretty competitive game here against Memphis. Don't love either of these teams. When you get two bad teams playing against each other, there is some upside going to those cheap guys, and he's a little bit too cheap.
Yeah, he was already coming in at 21% ownership on DraftKings. Like, I feel like
Yeah, he's going to
he
be
should
fine.
be he should be twice that now for sure. 5,100. That's one of the best plays on the slate.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to look at value centers real quick. So we're not going to get the model update before we get out of here, but I imagine Nick Richards is going to be near the top. If you want to see the model update in 10, 15 minutes, sign up for the site, $7 a week. It's pretty good value. But Duop Reith, I mean, yeah, 58% on DraftKings. This is going to come down since we just got another couple pieces of value, but I don't know. It seems okay.
Yeah. I know there's guys in the NBA circles who they think he has some talent, so maybe there's some upside here. Again, not the best matchup against Golden State, but as far as matchups against the front court go, it is one of the smaller front courts, so there's reason to like him at the price. I think at the ownership in high risk contests, you could get away from him comfortably. We're projecting him for 23 minutes, which would I think be a career high. So maybe that's aggressive, especially against a small team. But at the same time, I mean, there are not many plays on this slate sub 4K that we can even consider. So he does look good here.
And then, yeah, I'll just mention PJ Washington again with the power forward eligibility. It's pretty great. We can still play Embiid, Nick Richards, maybe mix in PJ Washington, and I imagine his ownership's going to come up a little bit. But he's showing up as pretty good value, as is Nick Claxton. So before we get out of here, let's just sort by ownership. And like we kind of mentioned the core. I think my core at this point is going to be Nick Richards, Bojan Bogdanovich, Jabari Walker. Who else are we throwing in there?
I think on FanDuel, you probably also include maybe Dinwiddie, just
Hmm.
because he's underpriced. Sexton on FanDuel, I think at 5,200
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. But
Mhm.
otherwise, I think it's consistent between the two sites. Definitely Richards, definitely Bojan over on DK. Um, and yeah, we're both on Trey Young. So if there's a pay up, I think that's our guy tonight.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's a pretty strong core, I think. Then just mix in some of these mid range guys around it, like I said earlier, if we get some post lock value opening them up, someone gets ruled out, then they're going to be underowned. And I think that you definitely this is a night you have to stay by your computer if you're playing. You got to be ready to swap.
Any of these big slates, yeah,
Mhm.
it's necessary. Yeah.
Especially when we're already star for value to begin with. So yeah, appreciate you guys being here. I believe the Discord live is going to start in just a couple minutes with Jayhawk, and so if it hasn't started already, so head on over there. There are instructions in the description below. Any final thoughts?
Nope, just like you said, stay by your computer. And yeah, let's have some fun. Enjoy this 11-game slate because we are back to 2 games tomorrow. But that's it.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and good luck tonight. Let's get it.
Take care.